I'm Barry Kibrick, and I want to thank all of you who have been tuning into our show via YouTube. As a staple on PBS, I'm so grateful that you can now see our full episodes online. I hope you're enjoying them, and please subscribe to our channel so I can continue to make them available to all. Thank you. Theoretical physics, in most cases, leaves even the greatest physicists themselves shaking their head in confusion. I'm Barry Kibrick, and my guest, Dr. Leonard Mlodinow, is the one person other physicists turn to when it comes to explaining the most complex concepts. The co-author of 2 books with the legendary Stephen Hawking, Leonard is able to distill profound concepts of physics to show how they relate to our everyday lives. Leonard, I think you're getting close to either tying a record or breaking one, but welcome back to the show, my friend.
It's great to be here as always.
Well, you know, you're a true joy, and this time what I decided to do was really combine your work, because you've written with some of the great physicists, actually the great physicist, Stephen Hawking, and you've written some of the great physics books yourself. So I thought I would take a little bit of a combination of your 3 books. Your book on randomness, your book on subliminal, and your book on the upright thinkers. And the book on randomness was The Drunkard's Walk. And I noticed there's a bit of a connection I want to explore. And it begins with your own words that says, we have to have a deeper understanding of our conscious mind and our unconscious mind.
Well, if we want to understand what is really going on around us and where our real feelings come from and how we make decisions, then we have to expand our consciousness beyond just what we're normally aware of and understand how the unconscious processes in our mind influence us.
Now, you just said something interesting. You said consciousness. What I couldn't help, and this is what really caught my attention, is consciousness, in the big term, closer related to the unconscious mind than to the conscious mind? I told you I was going to take us somewhere. But that's the sense that I am getting, is that the unconscious mind may be more connected to what we now call consciousness than the conscious mind.
Well, it's a very interesting issue. In science, it's very hard to talk about consciousness because we haven't even come upon a good definition of what that means. Some people just talk about awareness, which is what we mean when we talk about the conscious mind. But many people, when they talk about consciousness, they mean something deeper, something to do with the soul or to the experience that we have of the world, the so-called qualia, and how we perceive and what we feel when we experience things. The unconscious mind, traditionally, in the Freudian sense, had to do with processes that influence us outside of our knowledge, but that we could actually reach through introspection, through therapy, and that we could change. But the modern view of the unconscious is that it's fundamental in our brain, that there are certain parts of our brain whose activity is inaccessible to our awareness. And there are other parts that generate our awareness, whatever that means. And the parts that generate our awareness are connected intimately to the parts that go on in the background. And the idea of understanding the unconscious is to understand what those influences are and how they work.
Well, the key here that I found that really, again, took the, as my son Eli says, if you're conscious of the unconscious, does it become consciousness? But here's, in a sense, it does, right?
Well, that's the point. You cannot directly be conscious of the unconscious. In Freudian theory, you could learn to reveal it to yourself. In modern science, the view of the unconscious is that it's inherently due to the architecture of your brain, outside of your reach. But you can learn about it through experiments and through functional magnetic resonance imaging of the brain. We can learn how the unconscious functions, and we can study the kinds of influences it has, even though we can't really become personally aware of those influences as they occur.
Well, here's your words that made me think along these
I'm sure
lines.
they're great words.
They are, they're yours. So, the greatest accomplishments achieved are by those whose unconscious mind not only allows them to be optimistic, but unreasonably optimistic?
Well, why do we have a conscious mind and why do we have an unconscious mind? We have, all higher animals have pretty much the same unconscious mind. All mammals, for instance, have similar structure of the brain, and their unconscious mind works in a similar way. And the purpose of the unconscious mind is to allow you living in the wild to react to immediate situations and survive. Now, humans, more than any other animal, have a conscious mind in addition to the unconscious. I'm not saying that other animals don't, but we have by far the most developed conscious mind. And one can wonder, why do we have that? And the purpose of our conscious mind, scientists believe, is for our social interactions, because the human species couldn't have survived on its own in the wild. And by developing a complex cooperation through the calculations of our conscious mind, we were able to survive as a species. Now, these two strands of our thoughts interact, the unconscious and the conscious. And unconscious is mostly related to our survival. And one of the things that our unconscious mind does is it gives us optimism. And unless you're a depressed person, it gives you unrealistic feelings of your powers, your strengths, and your abilities. So that when we face an obstacle, whether it's a very hard problem in physics that we probably should think we'll never solve, but sometimes people do, or it's a disease like cancer, or it's losing your job, in order to get through those difficult times, we need a certain inner strength. And that comes, strangely, from an unconscious feeling of exaggerated power that we have. When you compare people's unconscious estimates of their own abilities, or their estimates of their abilities in general, they're much higher than their true abilities. For instance, one reflection of that is if you ask, let's say, college professors, how good is your research? Well, obviously, on average, you should get, if you ask them to rate their research, on average, they should say 50%, because on average, it is 50%. Half of them are better than average, and half of them are less than average, right? But when you ask them that, they say, guess what?
Right.
90% of them say it's above average. So obviously 90% of them aren't above average. When you ask high school students about their abilities, there was a survey of 3 million of them. Guess how many of them say that they're above average? Well, if you round off to the nearest percent, it's 100%. And they've done studies on doctors, on attorneys, on all CEOs, and people just generally tend to overrate themselves. But I argue that that's a good thing, because it gives you the confidence sometimes to go on, and the feeling that you can accomplish things.
I was going to say, it sounds like a positive thing, and I'm going to show you how, in a few moments, we're going to tie it in with your book, The Drunkard's Walk in Randomness, because in randomness, you say the cord that tethers ability to success, just what we were talking about with the unconscious mind, is both loose and elastic. And there's something about that being elastic that we have to be paying extreme attention to, because if not, and we get rigid, like anything, it snaps.
Right. Well, those two books, Subliminal and The Drunkard's Walk, are a pair in a certain sense, because in both books my goal was to illuminate a certain reality that we don't normally perceive about the world. So when you think about yourself as an individual and your personality and your interactions with people around you, you're restricted to your conscious thoughts and your conscious observations, and you're not aware that a lot of reality that's affecting you is on the unconscious level. So it's hidden from you. And in the same way, when we look around the world and look at people's success and their actions and what they accomplish, a lot of people don't understand the effect of randomness in that, or of just plain luck. We tend to, from an intuitive sense, assume that when someone accomplishes something, that it's due to their hard work and talent. And that is a very large component, but we underestimate the role of chance. So if we don't understand the role of chance and luck in the way that events unfold, we get a false picture of the world. So both by not understanding the unconscious and by not understanding the role of chance, we're getting false pictures of ourselves and the world around us.
But one of the ways you clarify that picture for us is that the randomness we know we have no control over. What we have control over is whatever the randomness brings about. We have some control of how we're going to react, at least, to the random action. Am I corrected when you, and again, whether that be through the strong unconscious mind or the conscious mind or a combo of both, that's the advantage we have, not to control the randomness ever, but how we're going to react to it.
How you react to it. So for instance, if as an author, when I have a bestseller, do I say, I'm the greatest? Well, that's very dangerous. First of all, it makes me arrogant, which is an undesirable trait. But secondly, it also, the flip side of that is when a book doesn't sell, that I must be something wrong with me. And in reality, neither is true, because my books are my books, and I write them to the best of my ability, and then you have to factor in the results of how they sell, you have to factor in a lot of other issues which are outside of my control, and therefore, as far as my path is concerned, they are random.
Well, you say this, in fact, in line with that we might all benefit from being less certain even when a memory is clear and vivid. So uncertainty, the uncertainty principle I know is probably different in physics, maybe it's not so different, but uncertainty to some extent may be one of the highest forms of intellect that we could actually strive for. I know that sounds so crazy.
No, but that's true, because just as uncertainty plays a big role in physics, it plays a big role in our lives. And so physics without uncertainty is a wrong, outmoded form of physics. It doesn't correspond to the real world. And the same thing with your view of yourself and the people around you. So in the Drunkard's Walk, I give many examples of events that happen and accomplishments that people made, and how the role of chance had a great effect on their results, and an effect that most people don't realize. And without being cognizant of that, you don't have a true view of the world. Sports is a good example. When you have teams playing, let's say in the World Series, you might have one team that has a win-loss percentage of 650, and the other team from the other league might be 550. So one seems superior. Of course, the leagues might not be comparable. But let's say in an ideal world, they had played each other, and one had won 65% of the time and beat the other one. So you would think that team would win in the World Series, or that team would have a much greater chance of winning. But when you actually play out the World Series and you put in the probabilities, the 65 to 55, there's a very significant chance that the lesser team will win, even after 7 games. So, or if a team is up 3-2 in the World Series, and then the other team, or 3-1, and the other team wins 3 games in a row, people think that it's a tremendous comeback, which it is, and that it took a certain amount of steel and inspiration in that team to come back. But the truth is that if you were just flipping coins that were ranked with a certain probability of heads and tails, sometimes a coin, you would get 3 heads and 1 tail, and when you continued flipping, you would end up with 4 tails and 3 heads, and so the heads, which were ahead 3-1, would lose. But we don't think that the coin has a certain intentionality and inspiration. It's just part of chance. So the point is that these unlikely events can happen not just through heroism, but also through chance. And that's true in all aspects of our lives.
But you say in the book, it's the more at-bats, talk about the sport analogy, it's the more at-bats that we take that improves that chance no matter how you look at it. For instance, even with the coin flip, the more you did flip that coin, it may at one point end up 50-50. So in that sense, as you say, the more at-bats we have, the better of a chance we have.
That's right, because you want to always keep trying. So your failure doesn't mean that you don't have the potential to win, or that you won't win in the future, or you won't accomplish something. If you look at it as just another at-bat, what do you say when you fail? You don't say, I'm a failure. You say, give me another chance. Give me another pitch. Thomas Edison, we think of as the father of the incandescent light bulb, a great genius inventor. Well, guess what? He tried 999 ideas, roughly speaking, for that light bulb before he got the one that worked. So he had 1,000 at-bats, and he had 1 hit, which was good enough to make him wealthy, famous, and someone that we still talk about today. And was that just that one at-bat that it takes. So it's not how many failures you have, it's whether or not you can keep going to the plate and have that one success.
Well, that's why I brought in one more book of yours, The Upright Thinker. Because in there, in a sense, how can I put this? You give us the history and the reason for almost these 2 books, and that is our need to know. You talked about Edison. That drive, that need to know that I could make that with the right piece of filament no matter what, that might be as close to our primitive drive as fear.
I think it is. And again, if you look back at the purpose of our drives in our unconscious mind, it's to have us survive, to keep us alive. And when we were living in the wild and we were developing as animals, what was one of the most important things that we could, aspects of our character that we could have? It's the exploratory impulse. It's the idea that we want to learn, that we're curious, we want to find new things, because that's how we would discover new food and water. So if there's a drought, we know where to go. Or when the weather changes, we can move on to other places. We have to have constant discoveries to keep feeding our existence. And that was what the role was in ancient times. But in today's world, that translates to finding new cures, new medicines, exploring science, and learning.
Over a pastrami sandwich at Langer's Deli, where we met, I jokingly said something, and when I went back later on, I said, you know, it wasn't so much of a joke. And I shared a little bit with my family and you, and I said, I want, look, you're Leonard Mlodinow, you know Stephen Hawking. You know Barry Kibrick. So just for now, I'm playing your Stephen Hawking, okay? So why not, okay? I want to come up with a new concept that I think is inherent in your writing, that I can't help but need to share with you at this particular time. And that is, we know that the quest for a large part of physicists throughout time even was what we'll call this unified field theory, the theory of everything. And from what I gather, Leonard, and please definitely correct me in this case, but what it originally seems to stem with was the cosmic way that gravity and thing has an effect on the planets versus the quantum way where on the atomic level there's also things going on, but they're different. And the question always for physics was, could we find that unified thing that connects it all? Would I be correct in somewhat saying that?
Mostly correct.
Well, get it straight, really.
Okay, well, I would just say that on the atomic level, there are certain laws. These are the quantum laws that they follow. And in the cosmic scale, there are other laws, which Einstein uncovered, that are the laws of gravity and the way things develop on the very large scale. And what we would like is a single theory that encompasses both, so that when you plug in, we're doing something small now, that theory works, and that same theory works to describe the evolution of galaxies. But right now there seems to be a conflict between the quantum laws on the small scale and the laws of gravity. So it's not just that we have two different theories, the theory for the large scale and the theory for the small scale, but they actually contradict each other. And at the very minimum, we want to learn how to remove that contradiction. And ideally, eventually, most people believe we will and would like to find one theory that encompasses everything.
Well, my theory is that without realizing it, you've already done so. So here's the...
Leonard Mlodinow or Stephen Hawking?
Leonard Mlodinow. Wait, in
okay.
association with Barry Kibrick, okay?
Okay.
I'm beginning to think from your work as a physicist, and what I love about your work is you're a physicist that really is able to explain things to the general public without everybody going, what's he talking about? Because you have that knack. And I was thinking, is possibly what needs to be unified is the thought of randomness and design. Because there's an interesting quagmire that we face on one level. We see everything in our consciousness, in this case. We, as you say, we put patterns to it. We make those decisions. That's how we grasp things. Is there something that's really needs to be unified between randomness and design more than between the cosmic and the quantum?
Well, you can take that statement on several different levels. On one level, that's been addressed in quantum theory. So quantum theory, the theory of the atomic small scale, does encompass randomness. But there's also design, because if you look at the equations of quantum theory, they tell you that given the state of a system at one time, you can find the state at other times through certain laws. So that's design. At least that's the structure of how the universe works. However, what you find later is influenced by randomness. So on the quantum level, randomness and design are married. On the large scale of general relativity, randomness has no role. So those laws are what we call in physics deterministic.
So they're not unified at that point.
They're not unified for general. Right. If we could, if we found a way to incorporate quantum style randomness into general relativity, that would probably be the answer to what physicists want.
Then let me give you back your words.
Oh, okay.
Much of the order we perceive in nature belies an invisible underlying disorder, and hence can be understood only through the rules of randomness.
Right, so that I obviously find that not only true, but well said. Let me give you an example. Look at hundreds of years ago, scientists started realizing that the air is a gas, and we're swimming in this gas, and they wanted to know the physical properties of the gas. And before we had the theories of atoms and could understand that there are invisible particles that make up the gas, people studied the physical gross properties of the gas. So they learned, for instance, that if you compress something, the pressure goes up. You probably learned that in chemistry. Or by pumping a bicycle pump, right? And that when you pump it, the temperature goes up, the pump gets hot, right? So we understood the macro level of the world, but it was all a mystery as to why this happens. In the 19th century, when we started to understand atoms, we learned that if we create a mathematical theory of the atoms, which are moving more or less randomly, and we crank through that theory and calculate what happens when pressure and volume change, we could see why that happens. So we learned from understanding the microscopic randomness how it manifests itself in the macroscopic world. But the same thing is true in society and in your life, because a lot of little things happen, and you have to understand how they fit together to create the headlines of your life.
Well, that's why you say these words, reason. If we can decipher the design of the universe, which is what we're talking about, we can use that knowledge to better understand our place in it. And if anything seems to be something desirable for us to do, it's to find our role, our purpose, our mission, even if we're existentially 99.99% nothingness.
Well, to me, that is one of the main elements of personal satisfaction, or with my life, or my goal in life, or a comfort to me when whatever is happening, when things go badly, for instance, is to understand, well, who am I? What is my place in the world? And I think most people want to understand what is their purpose in life, what's your reason for being, and as a human, what is your place in the universe? I think for me, once I understood how atoms work and cells and how they fit together to form multicellular organisms, and how organisms evolved to create us and our brain, and how the greater universe evolved and what's out there and how the Earth fits in, it gave me a certain perspective that especially when I go through hard times, when, for instance, my father died, it was a great comfort, and it was a great comfort to him when he knew that the end was near, to think about yourself as part of a greater cosmos and what your role is in it.
I can't believe you're saying that, because our time is up, and these are the words that I want to end with. To my surprise, these are your words. To my surprise, I now felt that what I had learned thanks to my human struggle to understand the physical world didn't make me callous. It gave me strength. Leonard, thank you always for giving us all strength and for sharing your wisdom with us all.
Thanks, Barry.
It's my pleasure, and thank you for joining us. Now, before Leonard leaves, I would like to leave you with these words from my friend and one of the truly great thinkers of our time, Dr. Leonard Mlodinow. We humans see beauty in nature, and we seek meaning. We don't just want to know how the universe operates. We want to understand how we fit in. I'm Barry Kibrick. Understand all that lies between the randomness of it all and the consciousness of it all, and we will then have the wisdom to understand how we fit into it all. Leonard, I love you, brother. Thank you.
To connect with Barry, like him on Facebook and follow him on Twitter @Barry Kibrick. And to contact Barry directly, view past episodes of Between the Lines, and read his weekly blog, visit us at barrykibrick.com. Between the Lines with Barry Kibrick is made possible in part by Sam Ash Music, a proud sponsor of Between the Lines with Barry Kibrick. Sam Ash has been serving musicians since 1924. To unlock your inner musician, information is available at samash.com.